Morning.
Hey, how's it going, John?
Not too bad. How are you both? Good morning,
Good.
Ryan.
You.
Hey, Ryan.
Morning.
So we'll give folks another couple moments to pop on.
Okay.
And Marge let us know that she won't be able to make it today.
Oh, okay.
And actually, Brian also just sent an email saying he won't be able to make it as well. So I think we should be having Sean and Ken perhaps would be the other two folks joining in.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started here. Just kind of kicking off an overview. I don't think Sam is gonna be on today, but I think we are relatively in a good spot to move forward on our document so far. I'm hoping to kind of take a sort of the same approach as last time. I'm gonna have the group sort of guide the discussion to where we need to go. But generally, I think the document is in pretty fair shape. I don't think there's been a ton of areas of disagreement, which is good. So I think we can generally go through the sections by the end of the meeting and just make sure that there's nothing critical that needs to be added or that we're waiting for information on. I also just wanted to go over the SWAC and DSAC feedback that we received, as well as planning commission feedback. So I can kick us off with that today.
And Daniel, do you when you say the document's in pretty good shape, are you talking about the main our part of the main document, the main table of contents and all that, or are you talking about the draft subcommittee recommendations to the work group?
Yeah, so I'm talking about like our subcommittee's report that's in the major kind of reports appendix. But I do think that we have to go through all of our key findings and recommendations and make sure that we have those kind of organized and figured out, because that's what we're going to be including in this next draft number 4 for the work group. So I definitely want to try to go through those today, because that's what ends up in the body of the report mainly, is our key recommendations, key findings. We're a unique group in that we have a ton of recommendations and not a lot of findings, and most other groups have it the opposite way around, where they have a ton of findings and very few recommendations. But I think it's sort of the nature of our work that we weren't really tasked with as much of a sort of questions that we're endeavoring to answer, but we were tasked with figuring out questions to ask. So it left us in a unique spot, but I definitely want to make sure we're all on the same page on those findings and recommendations.
All right, and these are just navigation questions for me. So when I opened up the draft subcommittee recommendations to the BCTT work group, the most recent one that I opened, which is I think listed in the agenda, links to a document that's says at the top, draft updated 1/13/23. Is that what we're working with?
Let me double check here.
Yeah.
possible that the agenda has old version.
123, the 123 is on the webpage.
One,
Draft. Yeah, draft SMMP Subcommittee Report 123, 2013.
oh, all right, hold on a minute. Let me see if I can get on the same page here. All right, I'm looking at the web page, and I'm looking at meetings, and then I'm going down to meeting 10, February 15th, and then I go to the agenda.
Yeah, so I think the one on the agenda is wrong, and thanks for catching that, John. The one that
Okay.
Ryan was talking about is kind of when you go towards the top of the page before you get to that meeting section, there's a section that says relevant documents and resources.
Okay.
And then under working documents, that second one down is the draft subcommittee report. We have a Word version and a PDF version on there.
I see it. Okay, here's, all right, so I see, all right. Okay, let me just see something here. Table of recommendations. This is what we've been working on.
Yeah.
I looked at, I was just looking at the 113 one, and it looked, let's see, I'm just trying to see, I'm looking at where I was, questions to be answered at SMPP, and then you categorized, let's see. Highlight 2014. Key recommendations. Okay. Who needs to be at the table? Key recommendations, RFP to work plan outline for timely completion, RFP development. Opportunity for, okay. Contracting, qualities. I was looking at that one. Yeah, so that's section 8, contracting out, and this is page 19 of 33
Okay.
of that document. I was just going through it, and I was looking at content primarily, but then I was noticing content wise, we may have some redundancy in there between categories, unless the intention is to try to list things where they apply to more than one category. Because I like that we broke them up. Thank you, Daniel. To be more organized, but I'm just seeing some wordsmithing that's needed, and I don't mind doing some of that if you want. In between meetings, I don't think we should do that today, but that's what, those qualities of a successful applicant should include. And then the RFP. Yeah, I mean, it was just a couple, some redundancy that I would look at. So,
Yeah.
But I see that this is updated from what I had. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And I think generally if I think, yeah, maybe today, because this is probably going to be our last opportunity to weigh in for what makes it into draft 4. So I think in terms of what we're getting, like content wise, I just want to make sure that it's reflective of what we're talking about in terms of wordsmithing and the more kind of organizational piece. I really think that if there's anything that you want to clean up or organize differently, feel free to do that.
Okay.
And send it my way, and I'll put it in here and we can discuss it in the next meeting. But my goal for today is certainly just to make sure that as far as content, as far as the message that we're sending to the reader, I want that to reflect the group. And then let's definitely focus on getting this cleaned up. As soon as you can send any edits over like that, let's get them in, because definitely not set on any of the organizational pieces of this at all.
I'll take a shot at it. I mean,
Okay.
I'll do a quick review after, you know, and I'll try to do that today or tomorrow, but how would you like me to do that as I mean, I like track changes. If I mean, I could take the sections that I'm talking about out of this, just copy and paste it into a Word document and do some wordsmithing, and then you can decide, you know, you can review that. So we don't, otherwise you're going to see a lot of, you know, comments and things in here.
Yeah, I think we might be at the point where if there's nothing significant content-wise changing, we might be able to just skip over the track changes and just have that conversation with the group next time we talk about it and say, hey, John, reorganize this section. I'm not showing the track changes just for readability. What does everyone think? I think that would be fine. So if you want, I'll send out the Word doc today, just so that there's any notes captured. If we change anything today, I'll send that over to you and the group as a whole. And then if you want to edit that one, yeah, go for it. And we have the previous versions, so anything that's not, you know, retained via track changes, we'll be able to reference that stuff. But I think we're at the point where we're not changing anything so significant that we're going to feel like we lost content. I think we're just trying to refine. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
It would not be removing content on my part. It would just be where I see some redundancy, you know, like we're basically saying the same thing, or it could be said in a different way and include that, or a better word, you know, just that might be. So if we finish this meeting early, well, then I can get started on it 10.
All right. Excellent. Yeah.
Question then, you know, you mentioned at the start here about, you know, we've only got a few findings and a lot of recommendations. Again, that's kind of the nature of kind of our committee, if you will, as far as our scope and all that stuff. Do you feel like there's any other work we need to do there on it? Or here's my take. I agree with you. I think that that's the nature of what we've been asked to do with this particular charge, is like coming up with, this is what we think. I don't know. I guess, do we need to really dig into more findings, or is that just kind of, it is what it is, and we just kind of move on and say that's, again, the nature of what this is? And I'm just, maybe it's I'm just trying to make sure that we're in alignment, that this is all we got and this is going to be acceptable.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. I mean, I think the last couple meetings, you know, I had talked to everyone about sort of the need to get our findings in if we had findings. If, you know, I think the idea is, if we're to draw from our conversations and put anything on paper that's saying, here's what we learned from the conversations we had before we jump into the recommendation phase of that, I think, yeah, we definitely have to capture that as soon as possible. We have one more meeting, I think, scheduled for us before we're done with this document altogether. So I'm hoping the next meeting is really just going through the document and saying whether or not the group kind of approves of it before we get it off to the work group. Personally, I think at this point, just the nature of the document, I think having the recommendations the way they are is okay. But let's go through it. When we go through it today, there's a couple areas that we tagged in our last conversations as, here's an opportunity for a finding if there's anything that we can come up with while we're discussing it. Otherwise, you know, I think we'll be able to put out what we put out, and I think it's all, you know, good content and information either way.
Okay. Makes sense.
All right, so let's just briefly, I wanted to touch on SWAC, DSAC, and Planning Commission's feedback, and then we can dive into the document in more detail and see how we can address that feedback, perhaps. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna, I just copied and pasted it into our kind of pending big draft 4 document. I put it into our subcommittee's kind of small section of the body of that document. Underneath our summary of findings and recommendations, mainly so we have a list of things that we should be addressing and seeing how we can get there. Essentially a checklist of just making sure we have stuff covered. We got some really good feedback from Planning Commission and SWAC and DSAC. And, you know, as folks that aren't like buried in this document like we've been, I think it's really good opportunity for us to look at and see how the document can be improved for readability and understandability. So I'm going to pull that up here.
So you're saying it's an appendix?
So for now, I just copy and pasted it into kind of the center of the report where of the full work group report, where each subcommittee breaks down their key findings and key recommendations. I just put this stuff under additional information for now, and the goal is to just incorporate it to our document or key findings and recommendations, and get rid of it.
And they were commenting on the whole thing, not just for one particular subcommittee.
Yep, and I think generally, likely their focus really zeroes in on the findings recommendations that we had at that time. Just knowing how long this report is, I doubt that people were really diving into our subcommittee's section where we dive into the kind of the reasons behind that. But the good news is, I think we were, as far as the subcommittees go, I think we're in a really good place where our findings and recommendations really reflected all the stuff that we had talked about for the most part. So I'll go into it now. So the Planning Commission provided a couple kind of key pieces of feedback, which is summarized here. So the one of the main kind of concepts that came up in their discussion is how will this developing SMMP, so how will the eventual product impact waste outside of the county's boundaries? And one of the key things, I'm going to sort of address the last bullet point here and how it feeds into it, is essentially the understanding from the Planning Commission, at least individual members of the Planning Commission, was that an SMMP is largely going to be about a landfill. They see the context of all the things floating around with regards to solid waste and the kind of community discussion, and they see it as, oh, this is a landfill problem. I think in our discussions, we've sort of firmly declared that this is going beyond the landfill as an issue, and we're really talking about reducing the impacts of materials altogether across their entire life cycle. So they essentially kind of point out, we see this as a landfill issue, but we also see that this plan is trying to address things outside of the landfill. How do those mesh, and how do they end up in an SMMP side by side? So I think there's a couple ways we can address that in terms of clarity of the document, but that feeds into this concept of how will this impact waste outside of Benton County and other counties contributing to the landfill. Again, I think from their perspective, this plan is largely about the landfill. So when we're talking about the county's individual contribution to the landfill being so small, that doesn't reconcile. They're saying, why are we spending so much effort talking about Benton County and the ways that we can improve the waste stream here when it doesn't contribute that much to the landfill? And what can the SMMP do to impact those other counties that are sending the majority of materials to the landfill? So I'm going to pause there before we get into the suggestion piece. And any thoughts? Obviously, I think part of this is a clarity thing on what an SMMP is, but I just wanted to open it up to the group.
Yeah, so first thing that came to mind is maybe we have another key findings, that this document is not only an SMMP as it pertains, addresses the bullet point down there, Daniel, as far as two different topics, that this is about the landfill, but it's also bigger than that. And that's maybe one of the findings we've come out of this thing, is that yes, a recognition that there is waste contributed from Benton County that is maybe a smaller in the waste stream, but the issue is much, much bigger than that. And again, in retaining a consultant to solve this, it's a bigger issue. Do you think that would help add some clarity? I just throw it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that can go a long way to adding clarity and making that kind of a core key finding going into this document. I think that could be really helpful for the reader.
I agree. I think pointing that out more intentionally, I guess, would be helpful. But the other thing that I learned from their observations and comments is that this is the elephant in the living room. This, the fact that Benton County's contribution to the landfill, if that was all we were worried about, the Sustainable Materials Management Plan would address the waste generated within Benton County, and that will have limited impact on the overall landfill outlook, and this is not a one county problem. I don't think this is a Benton County only problem, because once the Benton County landfill becomes no longer available, then a whole bunch of counties have issues. And so why don't we turn this around to really address that? So a finding might be that, to recognize that the finding is, and it's, this has been obvious and it's been said many times in our meetings, what percentage of the material coming into the landfill is from Benton County, and should this SMMP spend more time on strategies to engage and influence the other counties, collaborate. I know the SWAC and DSAC had some discussions and some ideas about getting a regional collaborative together of some sort. Is that true, Daniel? Was that was on the agendas a few times, right?
Yeah.
So, Benton County is paying for this. Benton County has limited control over what the other counties do. Yet we are being impacted by it. The county is being impacted by it. So let's say that the finding, I would say that the finding is, despite or even though the county cannot control, there's a very limited way we control it, right? We can say, remind me of what the political solution is if we wanted to limit it.
The only role that the county plays is through the franchise agreements, maximum tonnage allowed. But other than that, we're not allowed to control any of the incoming waste to the county.
Right. So right now it's 1 million tons a year.
Yeah, 1.1 million.
Yeah. So the finding is that unless the county wishes to, through the franchise agreement, apply a lower threshold of waste, of maximum waste for the landfill, maybe not unless, but that could be one of the strategies. But that would be pretty harsh without some collaboration, with the other counties, and looking at it from a broader perspective. Maybe every county needs to have kind of an assessment of their overall plan for reducing waste, and having a plan. Marion County, we know that they've done some good things and we've been hearing about them, but so anyway, I just think that this is a good good point. I think we have to address it, because ultimately this document is going to probably get planning commission recommendations to the board. I mean, we would think the board of commissioners is going to want their input, and if the planning commission ultimately says the scope of this is not right, the scope should just be on the landfill, that's all we need to really address. To me, that would be very, very short-sighted. And I think, Ryan, you're on that page. I mean, just what you just said is basically saying, no, this needs to be broader than that. But I think we need to bring in these other counties.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think that was really well said, and I'm jotting down some notes. I think we have a couple kind of key findings emerging from this that I think will be helpful. And John, I think you're just right on the nose with what we can call out. We're working from these understandings, but we haven't necessarily called them out in the document. So I think that's really helpful. I'll try to kind of add this to the document, but essentially recognizing Benton County's relatively small contribution to disposal at the landfill, while also recognizing that waste material impacts are much broader than the impacts associated with the landfill, and that a plan like this to address the impacts associated with materials that are contributed to the landfill go way beyond the county's current jurisdiction, and other county collaboration would be needed.
And our plan, I think the Benton County plan should address that. How do you go about that? What's the best way to do that? Do you need to go, do we need to get a state legislation to authorize or even fund a longer term process for these multiple counties that utilize this landfill? I think it should be elevated to that level.
John, I totally agree with you on that. I mean, and I'm, we've got a very finite, a very tiny vehicle to work within to help other counties participate. Where my mind was going was like, well, okay, as a part of the franchise agreement, participating counties are required to have an SMMP in place or something like that. I mean, I don't know that you can tag that stuff onto a franchise agreement, but that falls in line with just what you're saying, that, it feels like a key finding is, in order to really get a more global solution that involves multiple counties, Benton County doesn't have any ability to really get there. You're just kind of the host, and you really need some larger statewide resources to bring this, to help encourage this overall. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, we could have out of, we get waste from what, like 3 or 4 counties primarily, right?
Yeah, I would say 6 or 7 is probably the closest to the core group of contributors.
Yeah. So, out of those 6 or 7, you might have 3 or 4 that would be on board on a voluntary basis to collaborate and participate in a plan process, a regional plan process. But then you have like maybe 2 or 3 that say, to heck with that, we don't need to do that, and go their own route, depending on the political nature of that county. And so, I think this is definitely a different aspect to what we're expecting of. I think we can stimulate through this the RFP to find a consultant that is not going to look at it with the blinders of, we're just going to look and see how Benton County can manage their waste better, but actually figure out assess and look at the whole landscape of waste in this region of the state, and call it for what it is and say, you know, whether we like it or not, our destiny is affected by these other counties, and make the planning process inclusive of that.
Excellent. So I jotted these ideas down. I'm going to do my best to sort of add them to the document, but if either of you or both of you can send me your thoughts, especially as it relates to key findings and key recommendations, that would make it as easy as possible for me to make sure that I'm capturing those. So if you can send those over, that'd be great. I'll add them to the document so that they can be included in this next draft 4, because I think this is going to be really important to try to address, but I wanted to capture the notes here. Briefly, I'll go into their suggestions. I think a lot of what we're talking about is captured here, but their first suggestion is that we should be encouraging Republic Services to implement the SMMP with other counties. I think that comment was not super clear, but I think it touches on generally what we're talking about, is essentially having an SMMP like plan with other counties. They commented on how the other counties that don't have plans are sending material here. So I think that touches on what we were just mentioning. But then also just encouraging the landfill to essentially either encourage or sort of force that process of other counties planning for wastes that are destined for the landfill. So I think we capture that largely, but we can, if there's anything else that we can do to kind of reword that to make sure that's addressed, that'd be great. The next one is encourage the work group to use the JSIP model of best practices when engaging with the community on the SMMP. So this would relate to how we're talking about outreach and the RFP process, but generally outreaching with the community. The comment here was that the Justice System Improvement Project did a good job of connecting with the community, and that the consultant should basically look at that as a model for how they could approach outreach to the community. So we can talk about that more. I think we can call out the JSIP model as an example when we discuss outreach. And I think that would sort of serve the purpose here. But I think that was a great suggestion. The next one is reaching out to neighboring counties that contribute to the landfill for feedback. I think generally that's probably included in what we've already had in this document, but just kind of jotting it down, making sure that's included. And then, yeah, John.
Is that feedback on these recommendations, you know, for the RFP, or is it feedback related to what we were just talking about?
I think it was feedback related to like the SMMP content and feedback related to the county's plan. So I think it more relates to what we were just talking about. I don't think they were asking for feedback as it relates to any BCTT work group process. And then lastly, incorporating the trucking and travel routes that will be impacted by the SMMP in the communication strategy. The gist here was when you're reaching out to communities about the SMMP project, kind of like they're doing with JSIP, reaching out to impacted communities, we should be considering truck travel routes from all these major sources of waste. So that would, the sense here is that it would go well beyond the county. This would be waste coming from all over the state, essentially reaching out those communities that are impacted by that truck traffic destined for Coffin Butte, as a means to connect with communities that might be impacted by the SMMP. So there's 2 outreach pieces here, the JSIP and the truck travel routes, as kind of modeling how to connect with the community. And then there's the sort of other county communication and planning that I think we've already sort of captured in our comments. So if you want, we can go down to the communication strategy piece and add JSIP information, as well as kind of expanded outreach to truck travel communities. But I just wanted to open up the floor, see what you thought about those.
It feels like that would be a spot to land this. I mean, I think this is both, both of these are good points. And I think they should be incorporated somewhere as something we don't forget about.
Yeah.
And I agree. And I think the communication piece could be included in that subcommittee's recommendations, but we can also include it. And
Okay.
yeah, and I agree with both of those. I think that's probably, that's well in line with what the Planning Commission is concerned about, is how this how it's still related to the landfill expansion, most likely, but right.
I mean, probably from their perspective, I think that was certainly something that they were zeroed in on when they're discussing it, is, how does this relate to our future work, kind of figuring out CUP processes associated with the landfill, and outreach is certainly, a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, the depending on the plans and the actual implementation of alternative waste disposal and recycling efforts, market locations could change, and the material that's currently going to Coffin Butte could be a significant percentage of it could start to be diverted in other ways, to other routes out of the county, and that could be any direction depending on where the market is or where the hub, the processing is, and that I think should be considered or part of the planning process, and of course communicated as it needs to be. I mean, if, let's say, trucks are, instead of having to go north to Coffin Butte, they're going to go more, we're going to see more truck traffic going west, east. That could affect other kinds of other communities. And
so I'm jotting down a comment here to include truck traffic assessment in the SMMP. Would that sort of help this move along if we're asking the consultant to include an analysis of that?
Yeah, but I would mention that not to be exclusive of landfill disposal at Coffin Butte. I would expand it to potential impacts of alternative disposal or recycling methods.
I like that a lot. I like that.
Because, once the landfill closes, then we're looking at different truck traffic going, different directions, east, north.
Yeah, and we're not addressing impacts associated with our material recovery streams right now, anyways, because we're so focused on landfill associated travel. But we're bringing stuff to Albany to be baled, then stuff from Albany gets brought to Clackamas for recycling, and that's largely not addressed in any of our discussions. So I think that's a really good point, John. Okay, well, I will add that here. Again, anything that you come up with, I'll put these notes in here. But any specific key findings, key recommendations, send them over to me so I can make sure to capture them. Otherwise, I'll give them my best shot. So let me dive into the SWAC feedback. I don't want to spend too much time just so we can get through the document, but I'll go over it quickly, and then let's kind of discuss it as briefly as we can to make sure that we're addressing it.
Daniel, could you enlarge that a bit?
Yeah. Sorry, I did my best. Unfortunately, it was in a PDF version, so I had to.
No, this is fine. I got it now.
Paste it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
So there might be one or two pieces of feedback beyond this. I'm going to double check the document that I have. But essentially, the first comment was that the SMMP is just massive. Like the scope of SMMP is, quote, too big to be a part of common understanding for the tight current time frame. And perhaps the section should say county will continue to develop SMMP with cooperation from landfill franchisee. So there wasn't, this was a written comment, but I think the gist is this individual was hoping to sort of simplify the SMMP discussion and essentially say that the county would work with the franchisee to develop it further. I think we can discuss, I'll go down the list and we can discuss it at the end. So the next one, diverting waste needs to balance the effort with economic benefit. So I think that coincides with a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in terms of the cost benefit analysis piece of this, but we can make sure that's captured. And I apologize. This didn't really come up in discussion so much as it came up in written format afterwards. So the context is tricky. The SMMP should state that any mandate to divert waste should show a cost versus benefit to the customers of landfill. Many regulations push the cost burden to the customer. Material diversion actions should be self-funding. So this very much coincides with the last comment. With regard to the environment, resource conservation, and climate problem, things cannot go on as they likely have been. According to the current international level of knowledge, the only solution to the problem is a circular economy with an IWMS, integrated waste management system, in connection with an energy supply based on renewable energies. The SMMP should have that as an underlying understanding. The next one is the RFP should proceed with the understanding that a solid waste management system with the technology available today can be a major step towards attaining a CO2-free waste economy. And planning the financial effort associated with the progressive approach to waste should be a key part of the RFP. This includes an analysis of how this financial effort compares to landfilling the waste. You want the entity that will work on the RFP to have the necessary international experience and knowledge. And then Benton County seems to be in a struggle between business as usual and the new path forward. The path of benefit to the county and its citizens, and the RFP applicant should be able to assist the county in navigating that struggle. So briefly, I'm gonna pull up, I just want to make sure I have everything. Okay, the last one, I didn't jot it down here, but the last one says, it relates to a recommendation we have, and it's just saying that we should include with relation to lessons learned from other areas, and they're basically saying we should include examples from California, Washington, or international examples. And I think they use or instead of and in that sentence. So it was a small reformatting of a key recommendation.
Yeah, that's actually, I saw that in one of our qualifications for the consultant, and it did say international experience, and we don't want to get someone from China that's got a great international experience, but nothing necessarily in the United States. So yeah, I definitely think we should reword it to and, even if you just change it to and, that would be good.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So any other comments on these pieces? I do think that a fair amount of this is covered in some degree in the work that we've done, but is there any thoughts on how we can emphasize these pieces, or any generally any thoughts on this?
Well, that first one, I would just say, that's that is a reality. You know, I I think the franchisee is going to be a part of this process regardless. And and I think that's limiting, you know, that would be limiting the ability of the consultant, I think, somewhat, and the whole, you know, how we've got this structured. If we just said the county should just, or I see they're just saying extend this whole process to, is that what this of it is? That first one is to like extend this process so that the county and Republic come up with the RFP?
I think generally, this is just my interpretation personally, but I think the gist of it is actually not to limit the SMMP to what has been compiled so far, but then open up the door to saying that the scope of this can be broadened through the county and the franchisees work on it. Essentially, not to limit the work to what has been done with this tight time frame and the obvious massive scope that we're drafting
Okay.
up so far.
Yeah.
So I think it was more just, you know,
Yeah.
trying to take a step back and recognize that it could be broader.
Yeah, that's a good opinion. I respect it, but you know, my opinion is that you gotta cut this off at some point and go forward. And I don't think extending it further is going to make that big a difference in what we come up with.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the only thing you could do is you could just put a qualifier there, an asterisk, you know, scope not, you know, scope is not limited by what is defined here, or just something that, you know, should it grow, this doesn't necessarily represent the sum total of all knowledge on this subject or how it's going to go.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good
Yeah.
qualifier.
Yeah.
And then there you go. Then it gives the group that is doing this an out to, oh, we're going to add to this. Okay, that's fine. But I agree with you, John. I mean, you could kick the can down the road for another 10 years and then decide, oh, finally there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately. That's and then there's I think in general, I just heard a lot about the whole idea of cost benefit and you know, evaluating these, that you know, there's a it's a valiant and just desire to have diversion strategies be matched with their economic value or benefit. And of course, you know, with every commodity, that's going to be different. You know, it's going to be where one will be a cash loser, you know, where the environmental damage of a particular stream of material is going to be so bad that if somebody doesn't step in and pay for it, then you know there's just no way to make money at this point. So I think that's kind of a very unrealistic thing to strive for. I think we definitely do want to strive for it, but I think it falls under this pretense that that I've heard throughout my career is, you know, why aren't we getting more money for this material? And you know, that's always been the question. And the business community and industry has never been that interested in trying to do that. Well, you know, there are Oregon is one of the states that has some legislation in place that's trying to level that playing field. I think that should be mentioned and as a goal, but I don't think it should be an absolute.
Kind of tagging on to that, I guess thinking out loud, I'm wondering if, as you're right, there's a couple spots where we're talking about economic dollars, cents, and all that. Could that fall into a key finding that the underlying economic cost benefit analysis would come into play, or just something that grabs this and sticks it in a finding so that, hey, this is something that's been brought up, that we need to be concerned about the economic cost benefit analysis. However, maybe that can't necessarily be the driver of the solution, because as soon as you do that, well, if there's no cost benefit on this thing, and you're right. I mean, how to define cost, John, as you were talking, environmental cost and all those things. So I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's well said. I think we should definitely know as best we can what the costs and benefits will be. And that perhaps that's part of the plan, or part of what we want the consultant to figure out, is set up a standard for the county determining that before it makes decisions on legislation or whatever, how it prioritizes some of the strategies that are going to be recommended. It should be vetted out. What's the sustainability of a waste diversion solution for a particular material, and is it just know what the costs are going to be, and what the impact in reduction of environmental impact, environmental and perhaps social impacts too. So I think economic alone is short-sighted as well. It's sustainability involves other things.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Daniel? I mean, we're kind of, I think, combining these two ideas together in a finding that is, come forth that, hey, how do you setting up a metric for cost benefit analysis, be it economic, environmental, social, or whatever, is something that needs to be done. And
yeah, I think this is a good example of what happens when we're steeped in this material, and then the reader looks at it and kind of sees it. Where I think we've all been talking about this. We've been talking about doing the cost benefit analysis from so many different perspectives: environmental, social, economic. And I think we've said that so many times throughout this document, but we haven't spelled it out in this way. And I think that's really important, just calling out, saying that we should strive for an understanding of a cost benefit analysis across these different categories. But we have to look at it from a more holistic perspective, not just economically. So I think that makes total sense. Okay. Should we, anything else on these recommendations? I think let's see. Yeah, there beyond that, I think largely the second the number 3, number 4, and number I guess number 6 are probably covered in the work that we've already done. We've talked about the kind of, I think we included already in our list of questions to be answered that struggle between business as usual and a new path forward. I think we've covered that a fair amount. We've talked about how this new approach to sustainable materials management is sort of needed to address the materials, the impacts of materials. And then we've talked about new technology as well. So I think the rest of it is probably covered, but I just wanted to make sure that you both shared those thoughts.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Excellent. So again, I jotted these notes down. I'll do my best to turn them into key findings, but send me, after the meeting, I'll send this over to you both, and then send me whatever you think specifically I should include so I don't miss it. All right. So that was great. Let's dive into the report here so we can start going through. I'm sorry, I'm going to scroll down here. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page and on the right track with getting this document towards kind of being finalized. So we have a table of findings and table of recommendations. I think we should. What do you think? Should we review those now as kind of quickly as possible, or do you want to go into the report kind of section by section and just make sure that there's no kind of lingering comments that you both had on the body of the report? I guess a key to this question is there anything you've written down that you wanted to address in the body of the report that hasn't been addressed? And if not, we can go into findings and recommendations.
Not from my perspective. Think we've been pretty thorough, but yeah. So I think we can go forward.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, let's dive into the findings and recommendations here then. I think let's just go through them, see if there's anything that we're not really capturing, or any major changes that we want to make. And this is just with the goal of making sure that the latest and greatest content is in draft 4. So there's many best practices and model SMMPs exists in Oregon and beyond, as finding 1. This actually did come up in the kind of verbal piece of the SWAC DSAC meeting. And the feedback was essentially that there are not many best practices that exist in Oregon and beyond. But I disagree. I mean, I think we've been through that plenty and saw pieces of different planning efforts that were excellent examples to look at the very least. I think they were seeing best practices plural as the issue, where they saw the plan as one best practice when I think we're looking at it as elements of different planning efforts that have happened that we looked at. So.
And speaking of other plans, did the DEQ's, the plan that they have been working on since, forever, 2010 or 2008, and then going forward, and various updates. That's I know we've mentioned that.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, in terms of the RFP, if we have considered what their RFP looked like. That just use that as a model for the final development of the RFP. When they, they hired a consulting firm to manage that whole process. That's when I first met you, Daniel, at one of those sessions up in Salem.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of the firm, but that they should definitely, they seem to have done a great job with that. And I would think that RFP might have some application.
Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe in terms of how to fit in this document, we would just go to the kind of RFP process piece and call out DEQ's RFP process and consultant.
Yeah. If we can get a link to it,
yeah,
that'd be good too.
I'm going to scroll down there really quick. I'm sorry about all of this. I just want to make sure I'm capturing that, because
Yeah,
I don't want to miss it.
That was my only note.
So John, DEQ had a pretty thorough RFP already developed for this entire process, then, as scoping out an SMMP then?
Yeah, I wasn't involved with so much, or didn't, I started to get involved when they started to engage local stakeholders and invited us to several sessions where they were presenting this whole effort to look at modernizing Oregon's recycling program, or Oregon's approach to recycling. And I think the consultant led a lot of the discussions, and then there were some key DEQ people that were involved, and members of then they had various subcommittees. But I never saw the RFP on how they selected the consultant, but I imagine that was a pretty significant process.
And,
Yeah.
you know, and what is it, you know, I mean, that's a
No, it's.
beg and borrow, or, you know, that's anything we can, why reinvent the wheel? That's awesome.
Well, the other benefit is they have a fairly full understanding of Oregon's politics, Oregon's situation.
Yeah, and just from a statewide systemic look at what the challenges are and how things work and how it can be better. I think bringing that sort of perspective is really important, kind of really segueing into what we talked about earlier, is bringing that regional approach in. So I think that was a really good comment, John.
Yeah, so we might tweak that first one and just say model SMMPs and the art related RFPs, or somehow include RFP in that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So model SMMPs and related RFPs exists in Oregon and beyond. And that sort of frames us up for the following recommendation of you should use those as reference.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one, we have the charges with the SMMP subcommittee are intimately related and should be included within the RFP. That's sort of a finding.
Will be or should be. Should be might be.
Yeah.
We're not presuming.
Will be. Yeah. Sorry. And will be.
Well, do we want will be? Do you? I mean.
Yeah.
Our finding. This is our finding. So our finding is that it should be. I don't know if we can presume that it will be.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
They may say, look, we just want to have, in the end, we just want to have a, focused on one aspect of this, not all 4 or 5 of these questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I changed that to should. Do you think that covers it, or should we add or change anything here?
So this is basically saying that the charges of the subcommittee, which were already defined by Benton County, are intimately related and should be included within the RFP. So that's all we're saying then is, if I read this right, we're mirroring back what the charges for this subcommittee were and saying, hey, make sure you look at that when you're developing the RFP.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the gist. I think the other goal here is that as we divvy up this report by charge, they're so intertwined that we're not going to necessarily do a good job of capturing everything in that siloed form. So that looking at the charge as a whole when you're developing the SMMP is important as well. Yeah, I think Sean might have come up with this one, and I think that was sort of the gist, the push for it, is that is complicated, and we should be making sure not to lose anything when we look at it from these siloed perspectives. Okay, so the next one is contracting out processes often include a technical advisory committee, TAC, which vet technical information from a consultant and get to a place of consensus, and a community advisory committee, CAC, which provide review in the technical experts areas of disagreement. So this is one from Sam that we jotted down as a key finding, and that leads into some of the TAC and CAC recommendations that we have below. I think this was pretty much verbatim what Sam said, but if there's anything we wanted to add or change here.
I'm good with that.
Okay. Length of overall project can be heavily impacted and defined by the level of public interaction / engagement included in the project. So this is from our engagement discussions and about how the actual project will vary in length depending on how much engagement is included. I think we covered this a little bit in the last session, but is there anything we wanted to add or change here?
I'm good with that.
No, it's fine.
Okay. The research and development aspects of the planning process can occur concurrently with public engagement. So this is one that we wordsmithed last time. We left the track changes in there, but we replaced it with, we had the whole, it can happen in the background, not using as much time as public engagement. So we corrected that to say concurrently. I'm gonna go ahead and accept these changes. Does that sound good to you both?
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
And then you're gonna add I think we ended up for earlier discussion today, we probably have 2 more findings at least.
Yeah, let's go through. That's a good point. Let's get that on there as much as possible. I'm sorry, I'm gonna jump around here briefly. This is a problem of working in a 500-page report. Okay. So try to copy some of these. I'm gonna do them one at a time. Yeah, I think it might take a little bit too much time to do this while we're talking. So
yeah, you could add them and then you might send them out to the subcommittee.
Yeah,
prior to the next full meeting.
that sounds good. Yeah, I'll contribute those, and then when I send this out, this document out, I'll just look out for it, and if there's anything you want to add or change, pop it in there, and then whatever's left, I think by Thursday we'll make it into that draft 4. But obviously those are all just drafts, so we'll be able to add and change as needed.
Yep.
Okay, so let's get through these recommendations, and I think we'll be on a really good path forward. So the first one is the consultant should provide recommendations based on analysis and extensive outreach and engagement with community stakeholders from the quote, who should be at the table list.
And then is the thing below it a rewrite of it?
Let's see.
It looks like it.
So this one is actually part of our very first kind of recommendation that was around the goals, values and goals piece. And it was basically saying at a large level, the document should be a sustainable materials management framework. It should incorporate thriving communities. Yeah, so this is sort of a big overarching goal or recommendation.
I see.
But there might be somewhere else here that we can merge that in. Let's see. I'm just doing a quick scan to see where else we talk about outreach. Yeah, you know what? I don't think we actually called it out. We must call it out in the rest of the document somewhere. But yeah, if this works to stay in, I'll include it here.
No, that makes sense.
I wanted to give Sam a chance to pop in, and if you have any comments or directions, Sam, feel free to let us know.
Well, my first comment is I've never really been in a Zoom meeting or whatever this program is where 4 good-looking and intelligent guys who are all present at the same time. I just want to take a second and just relish that moment, because if the press got wind of this, it would be all over.
I think we'd be on the cover of some magazine.
Oh yeah, and emphasis on some magazine. Like the before ad for plastic surgery.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Here's what my patients look like when they came in to see me. No, I mean, I was just, but I just finished the joint subcommittee meeting. I popped in to see if there's any questions or comments. I have no designed added value beyond that.
No, we're
All right,
doing,
Sam.
making good progress, and we've had, I think the most productive part of this was, processing the, comments from SWAC, DSAC, and the Planning Commission.
Great.
There's a couple of really good insights there that led us to actually add a couple of findings and maybe even a recommendation.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, so now, Sam, we're just going through the findings, recommendations that we have. Just making sure that we're all on the same page with kind of the major content there leading into draft 4. And then if we have any spare minutes, we're going to be going through the rest of the document and just highlighting any other areas that we wanted to cover. But generally from this group is the gist is that the main content of the document doesn't have a lot of kind of major missing pieces at this point that we've identified. So we'll try to queue those up between meetings if there are any remaining before our next one.
Great.
All right, so I think this second recommendation here, we've gone over this a bunch of times. So if there's any thoughts or changes, this is the one that we talk about, core values.
You just got to renumber them.
Yeah, I'll renumber. I'll go through all these and renumber them all. Yeah. We're also going to be removing the recommendations and findings from the body of the document per Sam's request. So I'm going to have to change where they link up to the relevant content in the body. So I'll go through that all before we get it into draft 4 and clean it up a bit.
So Daniel, this next one, recommendation number 2, this is funny because we were just talking about that, this very item here. So it looks like you've already kind of covered it. So maybe this is just a matter of a wordsmith based upon what we were talking about from the, was it the Planning Commission or the comments that come in?
Yeah, and as much as I love the circular economy and that vision, I think we need to be more specific.
Can we look at what we wrote or what we'd kind of come up with there real quick?
Yeah. Okay, so I think it was in the SWAC DSAC discussion.
Yeah, there it is.
So we said diversion versus economics might not make sense economically. So the cost benefits might be unrealistic. This should be a goal, but not an absolute. And then the key finding that we kind of got to at the end was the underlying cost benefit analysis would come into play. However, that can't necessarily be the driver of the solution. And we should focus on what is the sustainability of waste diversion between economic costs, environmental, and social.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the sole driver of the solution. But I think the other thing we came out of that was the RFP should or the result of the process should give us a method of measuring the cost benefit of various strategies and solutions that are recommended by the consultant.
I like what you're saying, John. It feels like that captures the essence of what the key finding that we have down below is trying to get to, right? And we're wanting to have a recommendation on what is the cost benefit or a way to get there.
So I'll copy and paste this in here so we can see them side by side and work on that. Sorry about the scrolling. I'll eventually get good at doing that. Okay. So we'll see them side by side here.
Yeah. Content. I would start it out the same way, SMPP content. I would take that first sentence out. I just would go, SMPP content should incorporate the sustainability of waste diversion, strategies, tactics, and provide period. And then maybe the last sentence about a metric or a method that the consultant may be able to apply.
I like that.
So the result of the process should give us a method of measuring cost benefits. Maybe we have that can be measured by the consultant, but maybe that can be evaluated on an ongoing basis or something.
Yeah.
Can be measured and evaluated or something like that.
Yeah. And I think we still could say something about circular economy, that an aspirational goal it's an aspirational goal to be considered is how materials in Benton County fit within a circular economy framework.
I'm gonna get rid of. So I just added an aspirational goal should be included of how materials in Benton County can fit within a circular economy framework.
Yeah, I think I'm good with that.
Okay. I think that really covers it. The only thing I think we might be missing from the original is incorporating the sustainability of waste diversion strategies and tactics. I would say materials management strategies and tactics.
Yeah. Yeah, it's broader.
Yeah, because I think the original comment was really saying all of the things that we're recommending in that table of contents there should be a cost benefit analysis done. And I think what we're saying is that should be the case with whatever materials management stuff comes out of this. But it should really focus on giving us a method of measuring that. And then we're relating it back to the goal of the circular economy framework, which I think we're capturing well.
And that paragraph that's right below that could go away.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. Nice work. Okay. So the next one, SMMP should clarify cost benefit perspectives being addressed through an equity analysis, including financial, equity of circular economy, how it engages and impacts consumers, a perspective that goes beyond landfilling, and who's at the table list of stakeholder perspectives. So this kind of relates to the cost benefit analysis, but more importantly, it brings in the equity lens into what we're talking about. So I think it's a good location for it. I think it's really a good follow-up for what we just spoke about. Any thoughts on this piece?
I'm good with that.
Okay. All right. So to get us through this, I'm going to kind of go back to back here and just feel free to let me know if there's anything that jumps out that you want to address. Okay.
Yep.
So bring lessons learned into the process from other sources, including feedback from other counties, lessons from past Benton County experiences, examples from California, Washington, or international examples. So this is the one of the comments from SWAC. They had highlighted this "or" here, and we just want to see, John, did you mention that an
Yeah,
and?
I would just change it to
Yeah.
and then we've got it covered. That was a really specific suggestion from them.
Yeah. Okay. Beyond those at the county, a wide assortment of stakeholders should be brought to the table. County stakeholders include community members, advocacy groups, business and industry, local and state government, and resources for innovation. See report for full stakeholder list. So John, this is the one that we talked about at the first one. This is where it's related to that stakeholder list.
Yeah,
let me
okay.
just-
Gotcha.
I'm going to pop it in here just so we see them side by side.
Yeah, this is kind of saying the same thing, isn't it?
I think so. I think the number 5 or the one on top is just covering who should be at the table. And then the next one is basically calling out the level of engagement. So I think we can probably group them.
Yeah.
Like if we're just add this to the end.
Yeah. Like that last sentence is how it should happen. The first part is the intention.
Yeah.
And I think this is where we might mention, or maybe we should make it a separate one, about the whole idea of other counties. But
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Let's see.
I mean, that's so important. I think it should probably stand alone.
Yeah, I think you're right. Especially since it kind of came up in the context of not, something that looked like we had missed.
Yeah, Sam, that's the biggest thing. I just want to mention it to you that came out of those comments for me from the Planning Commission was that, they're seeing it from the perspective of, I think, still a change to the landfill, and how is the landfill going to be impacting, or this RFP is going to address that, correct? Is that what you're about? But they also acknowledged you have some much broader scope to this about sustainable materials management, and their point was, how does this make a difference when only a small percentage of what's going to the landfill is coming from the county? So we decided, the three of us, that yes, that's the elephant in the bedroom. You're exactly right. We can't do it with blinders on. There needs to be, and in fact, it should be the business of the consultant to help us figure out how to collaborate, cajole, and legislate whatever the other counties role in this. So it actually broadens the purpose of the RFP and what we're looking for. And so we're actually looking for not just somebody, a consultant that has a worldly understanding of sustainable materials management, but someone that's savvy about this whole dynamic of, we don't have direct control over what these other counties do, and unless we're going to make some major changes to the franchise agreement about waste thresholds to the landfill, that it's out of our destiny. So shouldn't our effort perhaps be, with this plan, to at least include strategies that would get these other counties more involved and engaged in a collaborative long-term approach? And that was our thing.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Good catch. I don't know if you guys consider this too, and who should be invited. And I know we're not saying here are the list of the 20 slots and here's how they should be filled level of analysis. But, you know, if you get some of the business associations and environmental communities participated in the SMMP process, those organizations can oftentimes, they cover more than just Benton County. They are multi-county, multi-city. Well, it's really county, multi-county jurisdictions, and that's another way to bring these perspectives to the table, that we can't do it alone, folks. Benton County can't in and of itself solve this problem.
Correct. Yeah. And some of them will be very, like, you know, maybe there's a conference of mayors, or there's waste associations there, you know, there's AOR. So there's, yeah, multiple.
Right. And, you know, speaking of acronyms, there's also AOC, is an association of Oregon Association of Counties, or what is that? There's an acronym. I can't remember what it is, but it's an association of all the counties.
Yeah.
That might be a specific thing for them to look at. Is basically the bottom line is we need broader representation on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we also brought up the idea of that DEQ led this whole process to modernize recycling in Oregon, and Daniel and I were brought in on that in the stakeholder engagement process, and it was evident to me that the consultant who was involved in that was incredible and did a fantastic job. Led to this legislation that is now in effect. And so maybe the RFP for that would be helpful to our process, as well as potentially that particular consultant being included in a list.
Great.
So I wanted to jot down here at the who should be at the table list, just that idea that these stakeholders may represent a broader area than just Benton County, because I think that's a good transition to the next recommendation that we're working on, and I think it sort of helps fit the intention of what we're talking about. Any objections to that?
I think it goes beyond. It's not may help. I think it's, you know, we should have them there because it will help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to soft pedal it.
Okay, excellent. So I'll work on getting that highlighted piece added. So we only have a couple minutes, so I'll just get through as many as we can, and then we'll call it a day. So I think these next three are pretty straightforward. Benton County should use an RFP to find consultants for developing a sustainable materials management plan. The SMMP should address the subjects listed in the full subcommittee report, answering the questions listed as RFP priorities allow. Recruitment for the RFP needs to be extensive, and the selection of successful proposals should be careful and thorough. Qualities of a successful applicant should include those listed in the full subcommittee report. And just call out if you see anything that's wonky. The scope of work for this project is expected to be broad and comprehensive, with specific goals recommended for the county to consider as reaching for milestones. So we have to consider as milestones, maybe.
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have two. I was going to say you have two asses there, and, but that's something I shouldn't say on tape. But just.
So we're at noon. Do you guys want to go a few minutes over and keep going through this, or do you want to call it and have me send this out for more review? I want to be respectful of your time.
How many more do you have?
We have like
7.
I think 10. We have about 10 left.
Why don't you send those out from my perspective, and I'll take a look at them, see if anything And maybe everybody could
Yeah.
have that shot, and along with the notes for the other members that couldn't make it today.
That sounds great. Yeah, and I'll make sure that the notes that I took in that other section, I'm just going to make sure that they're all plopped right where they need to be, so that we can all evaluate them in one place. And I'll ask the group essentially to review the findings and recommendations, and then this really kind of calling out, this is what's going to be in draft 4 unless we get feedback from the group. So everyone can email us all and see if there's any last minute things that we need to add or change. And then also calling out that generally this is our last shot. This is the last call for any major content change, because we have one meeting left for this subcommittee that we've scheduled in 2 weeks. And after that subcommittee meeting is just going to be going through this document and essentially making sure that we're all on the same page, making sure that looks good. So I'll make that very clear for the group, and just so that you both know, next time we're going into it, try to come as prepared as possible. If there's anything that stands out that doesn't fit, anything that needs to be added, this is the next week or so, we should plan on getting that in.
Perfect.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you
Thanks, Sam.
both. Thank you, Sam.
Bye.
See you later.
See you later. Bye.